My name is Amber. I am a 49-year-old wife and stepmom. What I am about to share with you is a story that changed me in ways I never expected. If you enjoy compelling life stories like this one, be sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue to delight you with new stories. And don't forget to sit through to the end. This story has a few unexpected twists and turns. I still vividly remember the night Logan, my husband, brought it up at dinner. "Amber, I thought it would be nice to have Aiden stay with us for a while," he said, as if it was the most natural suggestion in the world. Aiden, Logan's son from a previous marriage, had just finished his freshman year of college and wanted a fresh start in life. The plan was simple. He would move in with us for a while to decide on his next steps. I was more than ready to step into the role of stepmom. Logan had raised Aiden to be respectful and responsible, and I expected the transition to go smoothly. But, as is so often the case in life, things didn't go as expected. When Aiden moved into the house, something about him changed. I had seen him many times before at family gatherings and holidays, but this time was unlike anything I had experienced before. He was no longer the withdrawn teenager I remembered. He had transformed into a young man with a quiet confidence that seemed to command attention. At first, I wrote it off as nerves. The arrival of a new person in the house is always accompanied by some awkwardness. But as time went on, I began to notice things that were hard to explain. It was the way Aiden's gaze lingered on me a moment longer, the faint smile that appeared when he caught my eye. It wasn't obvious, but it was enough to make me question my own perception. And it wasn't just the way he looked at me, it was the way he acted. He moved around the house like he always belonged here, like this place was waiting for him. Then came the evening that changed everything. Logan, exhausted from a particularly grueling day, went to bed early. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Aiden and I were alone in the living room, and the atmosphere was one I hadn't expected. I was in the kitchen clearing the table when Aiden walked in, looking for something to eat. The way he looked at me, his gaze soft and sincere, made me freeze in place for a moment. There was something unspoken in the air between us. It was both exciting and unsettling. "It's nice to have you around, Amber," he said sincerely. I smiled back, feeling strangely warm. After that, I could no longer deny the change. Every interaction became more intense. Every look, every smile seemed to carry a deeper meaning. I began to linger in rooms a little longer when he was around, and I caught myself smiling at him for no particular reason. It all seemed innocent, but there was a tension behind it that I couldn't ignore. One evening I found myself standing outside his room. I wanted to look through the keyhole, and it made the blood rush through my body, and I felt very warm somewhere in there just thinking about it. It was late, and the house was quiet. I took a deep breath, not realizing why I had even come. Then, without thinking, I knocked gently on the door. "Aiden," I whispered, my voice barely audible. There was a pause before the door opened. He looked at me, and for a moment I thought time stood still. I whispered something trite, but it was clear neither of us knew what to say. It was strange. Moments like that make the mind rush and freeze at the same time. He stepped aside, and I stepped in. The days that followed were filled with secret glances and subtle interactions. The tension between us grew, and it became harder and harder to ignore. And then, one rainy day, everything changed again. Logan had been called away on a business trip, leaving Aiden and me alone in the house. The rain outside created a cozy, almost solitary atmosphere. I was sitting by the window when Aiden sat down next to me. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. I turned to face him. He hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever feel like there's something you want but can't have?" I swallowed, my cheeks reddening slightly. "Yes," I said quietly, "more often than I can say." He looked at me with such intensity that my pulse quickened. "I don't want to overreact, Amber," he said softly, "but I want you to know I'm here. Whatever you're feeling, I feel it too." His words echoed in my head for a long time yet. The tension between us had reached a boiling point, and we were both struggling to contain it. But just when we were starting to cross the line that we couldn't go beyond, something happened that neither of us expected. Late one night, as Aiden and I sat alone, we heard a noise outside, a shadow moving toward the back of the house. Aiden looked at me, concern flashed in his eyes. "Did you see it?" he asked. I nodded, my heart pounding frantically. We weren't alone. The realization of that fact hit us like a cold wave, and the atmosphere between us changed instantly. The romance of the moment evaporated, replaced by a general sense of unease. Aiden walked quietly over to the window, trying to get a better look. The shadow was gone, but the unease remained. "We should call the police," I whispered, and he nodded. We made the call, and 2 officers arrived a few minutes later. They searched the lot, finding signs of someone lurking outside the house. The officers' flashlight swept across the ground, revealing footprints in the dirt leading to the back gate. "Looks like someone was definitely here," one of the officers said with a serious expression on his face. Logan returned home the next day, suspecting nothing of what had happened, neither the near affair nor the near invasion. But the shadow of that night still lingered. Aiden and I exchanged wary glances, realizing that whatever was going on between us needed to be put aside, at least for the time being. The presence of the intruder had changed our priorities. We had to remain vigilant, focused on the safety of our home and family. In the weeks that followed, Aiden and I kept a careful distance. We talked less, avoided being alone, though the tension never completely dissipated. Every now and then I'd catch his eye, and a spark of what had been before would flare in it. But we realized the risks were too high, not just the emotional ones, but the very real ones that crept up on us that night. So we chose caution, keeping our distance and focusing on what mattered most, keeping our family together. One evening a few weeks later, Logan got an unexpected phone call. It was a call from one of his old friends, Daniel, who worked in law enforcement. Logan listened intently, and his face grew more serious with each passing second. When he hung up, he turned to me with a grim expression on his face. "Apparently, there have been several break-ins in our neighborhood lately," he said. "Daniel thinks we should be especially careful." My heart clenched at this news. The anxious feeling from that night returned, and I exchanged a concerned look with Aiden, who had overheard the conversation. After that, we decided to take extra precautions. Logan had installed new locks, security cameras, and even motion sensor lights in the house. We all tried to pretend it was just a practical measure, but you could feel the tension in the air. Aiden and I exchanged brief, meaningful glances as we worked together to secure the house. We seemed to silently acknowledge the unspoken bond that had formed between us, though we both knew how important it was to keep our distance. One night, shortly after the security measures had been put in place, I woke up to the sound of an alarm. My heart jumped to my throat. I jumped out of bed, and Logan rushed past me to the source of the noise. I grabbed my robe and hurried after him, my pulse racing. Aiden came out of his room, his eyes full of concern. The 3 of us gathered in the living room while Logan checked the surveillance tape on his phone. The footage showed a figure moving near the back of the house, someone trying to get inside. Logan called the police, his voice calm but tense. Aiden and I glanced over, and I could see the fear reflected in his eyes. We waited, seconds seemed like hours, until we heard the sound of approaching sirens. The police arrived quickly, and we watched as they searched the perimeter of the house. One of the officers approached us after the search. "We found evidence of someone trying to break into the house," he said. "Looks like the alarm system scared them off. It's a good thing you had it installed." The officer's words should have been reassuring, but they only increased my anxiety. Logan nodded, thanking the officers as they left, but the tension in the house was as high as ever. Aiden and I exchanged a long, meaningful look before both of us turned away and went to our rooms. I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, my mind spinning with thoughts of what might have happened. The fear of an unknown intruder mixed with the complicated feelings I had for Aiden, causing a storm of emotions that made me feel overwhelmed. Over the next few days, Logan became more vigilant, constantly checking the security footage and insisting that we keep all doors and windows locked at all times. He even talked about getting a guard dog, something he'd never considered before. Aiden and I tried to act as normal as possible, but the tension between us was undeniable. There was a strange comfort in the fact that we both had the same fears, the same worries. It created a bond between us that seemed deeper than words. One afternoon, while I was in the kitchen making tea, Aiden walked in. He hesitated for a moment before he spoke. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I looked up at him, seeing the worry in his eyes. "I'm doing fine," I replied, letting him know that I was a strong woman.